Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308 or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Magdelena, and I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. It's a great honor to be here. Welcome to members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and welcome to the newcomers. I hope you guys keep coming back. This is a wonderful program, and if we work it as it's written in our literature, follow the service manual and everything, we're going to have a good life, and that's a life I like to share with you today. I am from Ensenada, from Baja California. It's not too far from here. I think it's about 3.5, 4 hours. I'm sorry, before that. I'd like to thank Kathy for asking me to speak 2 years ago, and the committee for accepting me, and God in the group conscience for accepting me to speak this afternoon with you. And also I'd like to thank you for the beautiful basket. My God, it's so big. I'm so glad I'm visiting my mom after, so I can, leave the basket somewhere. Can't take it back in the plane. And when Kathy asked me to speak, she said, it's the powwow. And I live in Seattle now. And powwows, we have big teepees, and we have Native American meetings. And I go, oh my God, how exciting. A convention where we can wear shorts, be on a teepee, have Al-Anon meetings under a teepee. And but I didn't think about the weather, because it rains all the time, so we have teepees. So it was a great surprise, and good surprise that it's because it's so hot. I don't think we would do well in a teepee. So anyways, what it was like and what happened and how it is today. My home group is a rent on Thursday night. We meet every Thursday at 7:30. And it's about 20 minutes south of Seattle. And if you're ever in the area, come and visit us. My home group is the oldest group in the state of Washington. My home group is one of those groups that used to be around, and when they wanted to register with AA, and AA said, we don't want you, you get your own program. And so Lois Wilson, our co-founder, she was so wonderful that her and her friend Annie sent letters to 100 groups that were registered with Alcoholics Anonymous and asked them if they want to be part of the Al-Anon family groups and accept the steps and the traditions are part of our program. And on June 17, one of our home group members wrote, Millie, she's no longer alive, of course, but she wrote back and said, we want to be part of the Al-Anon family groups, and only 85 groups responded, and my home group was one of them. So if you're ever in this area, please come and visit, something that Lois helped start. So anyway, thank you. Water. So like I said earlier, I am from Ensenada. My father is the first alcoholic I met. He started drinking when he was really young. My parents met when when they were about 15, 16 years old. My mom got pregnant, they got married, and I am the first child of 6 girls. And my dad always wanted a boy, but I was born, and he named me after his father. His name was Magdelena, so they just changed the O to an A. And my father and I never got along. He's a alcoholic who's very violent. He's still alive. He's still drinking until this date. I really don't know how God has kept him alive. I think he's been fermented with alcohol, you know. So I was named after my grandfather, and nobody ever talked about my grandfather. And I asked my mom, Mom, how come nobody ever talks about my grandfather? And she said, well, because he was crazy. And I said, well, what was wrong with him? And she said, well, he drank too much. And I said, well, can you tell me about him? So she told me that back in the days in Mexico, they didn't know what to do with alcoholics, you know, who drank too much. So they built a box in the backyard, and they stuck my grandfather in there. And they had a little door like this, and they fed him through the door, you know. And so that was the cure for alcoholism in Mexico back in those days. Al-Anons, remember? That was back in the day. It doesn't work anymore. We can go to jail for that. So, in case that you're a loving alcoholic, if you get tired of your loving alcoholic. But anyways, so my father, so I was named after this crazy guy, and my father, you know, he's that kind of man that always had other women on the side, and he didn't think very high of women. You know, he would say every time a child was born, he kept saying, oh, another prostitute, another prostitute. So I grew up thinking that I was a prostitute. And he didn't believe that women should be educated, so I was not allowed to go to school. If I wanted to go to school, I had to sneak out of the house. And he was, my father and I never got along. He used to tell me, in the morning, he used to tell me, Larguchona, get up and sweep the floor. And Larguchona doesn't mean anything. It's something ugly and long. And I have always looked the same, tall and thin. And so he would say, Larguchona, go get me a bottle of tequila. And I remember getting up in the morning and thinking, you know, going to the store, and I had no shoes, and had this tiny little sweater, and it was cold sometimes because Ensenada is right on the beach. And I remember walking to the liquor store, getting him this big bottle of tequila, coming back with the bottle of tequila. And I was about 7, 8 years old in Mexico back in those days. I don't know if they still do it, but I was able to buy alcohol. And so I will come back with the tequila, and on my way back, I'll be thinking, my gosh, I can't remember the last time I had milk. All we eat every single day is beans and tortillas. That's what I eat every single day. And so I will get home and tell him, you know, I can't remember the last time I had milk. And my dad's a baker. We never even had bread in the house. And I will say, you know, I can't remember the last time I had milk, and you're always drinking your tequila. So my father used to get really upset with me and pull out this little leather belt and just hit me. You know, all his anger used to go into my skinny body, you know. And I remember putting my arms up, trying to hold them, you know, from the belt going into my face, but I had belt marks all over my arms and my legs, and I would go to school like that. And the kids would say, you know, they said they didn't want to play with me, and the kids would say, we don't want to play with you. You're so tall, you know, there's something wrong with you. And, you know, most kids in Mexico are short and chubby, they're cute. And here I am tall and skinny, so everybody could see me. There was no way I could hide. And they would say, you know, look at you, your dad beat you up again. And we, you know, this morning, this morning, sorry. When I was getting dressed, I was thinking, should I wear these shoes or these shoes? You know, today, because of the program, I can make choices with shoes. When I was a little girl, I didn't have shoes. You know, I most of the time I wear those sandals, those huaraches, and the Americans used to donate things to the poor kids in Mexico, and that's how I dressed. And one time, I remember it was in the 60s. There was those palms, you know, people wore pumps, and I remember going to the shoe man store, you know, and I asked him, can you cut off those pumps, you know, the heels, so I can go to school? And so my, you know, the shoes went up like that. They were pointy, and that's what I wore to school. You know, it was better than being without shoes, and so. When I was putting my shoes on this morning, I was grateful. I have 2 pair of shoes, you know, or 3 pair of shoes. So my mom kept having kids, and I told Mom, you know, my dad's about maybe 5'4", 5'5", big belly, big head, really ugly. And my mom she's tall, gorgeous, you know, she's shorter now, but she used to be 5'11". She was beautiful, and then she kept having kids, and I thought, you know, why does she keep having kids with that ugly man? He's so ugly. But, you know, she was, back in the days, if people took the pill, the Pope told them that if people took the pill, they could go to hell, and she didn't want to go to hell, so. But what she didn't know is that she was already in hell living with the ugly guy, you know. My sponsor tells me that my mom's choices are none of my business. So if she wants to choose an ugly guy, that's her choice, you know. But anyways, I also remember while I was in school, the kids didn't want to play with me, and they said, well, we don't want to play with you. They said, you smell like beans, and I did, because we didn't even have a toothbrush. Also, I used to, you know, my father used to get me up in the morning and tell me, Larguchona, sweep the floor. And I remember looking at my dad really, you know, with those eyes that I just wanted to kill him. And I would say, you know, why do you want me to sweep the floor? It's a dirt floor. You know, so it just didn't make any sense to me. But we always had that relationship. But on the other side, on my grandparents, on the maternal side, I had these wonderful grandparents, and I really think that their mission in life was to love me. They just loved me. I could do no wrong. They called me my black girl, you know, my negra, come and talk to us. And I remember spending a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandma, you know, they live in a really small house, you know, 2 rooms, and in the prostitution neighborhood, and I just couldn't understand why they lived there, but that's where they lived. And my grandmother used to make flour tortillas, and then she would put butter on it, and I would eat that tortilla, and I just felt so happy with my grandparents. Then I would go next room and talked with my grandfather, and I thought my grandfather was so intelligent. You know, he read books, and I remember opening the books, and they were old, and they smelled good, and then my grandfather would start, you know, reading stories to me, but while I was sitting on my grandfather's laps, he will, you know, I was helping him clean the seeds out of the marijuana, and then I will help him roll the joints, you know. And then my grandfather will take a hit, you know, and will light up the joint. And he said, here, you want to take a hit? And then I would say, no, Grandpa, that stinks, you know. But while I was sitting with my grandfather's laps, he was also talking to me in Japanese or Chinese, you know, because he told me he traveled everywhere. But I think I had been in Al-Anon for about 5 years when I realized that when my father was talking to me, grandfather was talking to me in Japanese or Chinese, I think he was high, because, you know, how will I know that, you know? And then he also told me that he traveled everywhere, but then I also learned later that marijuana makes people lazy, so I don't think he went there anywhere, you know. So. When I started dating, I didn't want anything to do with alcoholics, because, you know, it reminded me that my father, you know, but if they used drugs, of course I was right there, because, you know, I thought addicts were higher class than alcoholics, because they didn't look as, you know, like my father will always vomit all over us, and my grandfather, even though he didn't take showers very often, there was no vomit around, you know. So anyways, and one day, because my father always had a woman on the side, one day he came and told my mom, you know that I'm seeing so-and-so, and she's pregnant, and you know that I don't love you, and so you need to leave and take your 5 kids with you. And not knowing what to do, my mom started looking for work, but there's no work in Mexico. You know, she had a 6th grade education in her middle 20s with 5 kids. And she started looking for work, and there was nothing. And somebody offered her or told her about a job in San Diego County as a nanny, as a maid. And so my mom talked to me, and she said, can you take care of your sisters while I go to work, because, you know, your dad doesn't want us here anymore. And I said, sure, Mom, I'll take care of my kids and of my sisters. And that's when I became their mother. I wasn't the best mom to my sisters, although I was older, the oldest. I did what my father told me, what he did to me. He beat me up, I beat up my sisters. And so my mom came to work in the U.S. and started sending money, and we started eating a little better. But you know, I didn't know that alcoholism was a progressive disease. I didn't know my father was sick, and I just knew that he was a monster, and I hated him. And many times I wish I could kill him. I thought about ways to kill him. You know, and I remember also when every once in a while, you know, we had no electricity, no running water, no food, and he would go outside and feel depressed, and his father had left him this machete, and every once in a while he would get the machete and go outside in the dark, and my mom would say, you know, go see what your father is doing. And when I saw that he had the machete towards his stomach, I tried not to make any noise. You know, I didn't want to mess up his plan of killing himself. So I thought, with the, you know, if the alcoholic was out of the picture, life would be okay. But, you know, he never succeeded. And he's still alive, and he's still drinking. And so my mom found a job, and my father's alcoholism progressed, and he stopped looking at his daughters like we were his daughters, and he started looking at us like we were women. He started touching my sisters in a way a father should never touch his daughters, and started spying on me when I was getting undressed, and I got scared, and I wrote to my mom and said, Mom, this is what's going on at home. And my mom knew, because she had tried to stop him in the past, and I was just so angry. And she said, well, you can come and live in the U.S. with me, but you know you got to work. You can't go to school. And I said, Mom, that's fine. I was not learning anything in school. I had stayed back in 3rd grade 3 times because I was just this tall, stupid prostitute. You know, that should not be in school. My father believed that women should be selling food on the streets, and I was just, whatever my father told me, I became. I thought I was, you know. In reality, whatever my father said, that's what I was, and because I didn't hear anything positive. How can you hear something positive when there's nothing but alcoholism and drug addiction around your home? You know, we were not allowed to go to cousins' homes because they didn't like us. They didn't like my dad. They didn't like us. And, you know, it was a real struggle to go to people's homes in the program. And I still have that, you know, but thank God I have a program and people that are so loving and they accept me just the way I am. But anyways, so I told my mom she said, you can come and work here. And so I came like most Mexicans do, the Mexicans that I know, at least. I jumped the fence and came to work here illegally. And I went to work at a chicken farm. And in this chicken farm, it was in San Marcos, and in this chicken farm, there was rows and rows and rows of chickens. And in every row, there's about 20 boxes, maybe more, I don't know. And in those wire boxes, there's chickens. And under the chickens, there's a chicken poop, right? So every time my job was to give him shots or something. And every time immigration came in to take the illegal Mexicans back to Tijuana, Some of the Mexicans will run up the hill to hide, and some of us will hide in the chicken poop. And I was one of those who hid in the chicken poop. And I remember just sitting there and hoping they wouldn't find me because if they found me, that means that they will take me away from my mom and back to the monster. And you probably never been in the chicken poop, but when you're sitting in the chicken poop, there's worms and there's bugs and the chicken poop is really sticky, it's really, really creamy, and it sticks to your skin. I was 15 years old, and I had a lot of acne in my face, and so I just felt that I was part of the reject of this universe. I was nothing. I didn't even exist in this country. And one day, I asked my mom if I could go to school, and I said, "Mom, can I go to school? I have no friends." And she said, "Well, you can go to school, but it has to be night school because you have to work." And I said, "Yeah, I'll go to night school." I was so grateful for the opportunity to go to school. And so I went to school, and I saw this gorgeous guy. There he was. He was tall. He was beautiful. He had long hair. And when he moved, the whole world moved with him. I just felt in love. I felt in love with him. And then I remember, looking at him and looking at myself and the tapes, you're stupid, you're tall, you're dark, you're a prostitute, all those tapes, whatever my father told me, I thought I was. And, thank God for a good sponsor. Thank God, because how do you get rid of those tapes? I don't know, but without the help of my sponsor taking me through the steps, step 2 that says we have got to return us to sanity. He was in Magdelena. Why will you believe a person who's drunk? Why do you believe him? In our Al-Anon literature, in the One Day at a Time, it talks about that when a person is feeling bad about themselves, they're just expressing how they feel. So my father was just expressing how he was feeling. That's why he talked so negative. But I didn't know, So those tapes were going through my head, and when I saw this guy, but in our Al-Anon literature, it also says that anything we let go has our claw marks on it, So I saw him, and he was not going to get away from me that easily, even though I had low self-esteem. So anyways, I had one friend now, and this friend, every time we would walk the halls together, and every time I saw this guy, I would throw kisses at him and push my friend so he would think it was her. And one day he realized it was me, and so we were at this park. This friend and I went to the park, and there he was. This guy had a lot of friends. He was very attractive. Everybody liked him. And so this girl and I were at the park, and then there he was with all of his friends, and he calls me over, and after we introduced our names, he said, "Would you like to go to a concert tonight?" And I'm like, I wonder what that is. And I said, sure. And then it was 1975, and Bad Company was playing in San Diego. And so I had never listened to English music, but I didn't care, And so he came to pick me up, and he had this little car. It was a little Nova. And I got to sit next to him, and I looked in the back, and there was a lot of people piled up on top of each other, because he had a lot of friends. He couldn't leave anyone behind, So I got to sit next to him, and I thought, I wonder how they fit in there, but that's okay. I'm sitting next to this guy, and I got to sit next to him, and he pulls out this big 8-track player, puts it on the stereo, and this loud music comes out, and I was just so impressed. My gosh, a woman like me here. And then they started smoking marijuana, and they passed the joint in front of me, and they asked me if I wanted to take one, and I said, oh no, thank you. But I thought in my head, I can roll them for you, because by that time, I had years of experience rolling joints, you know. But since it was our first date, I didn't want to be too pushy, so I said, no, thank you. So we dated for 2 years, and in these 2 years, he tried to kill me a couple of times because he was high on acid, and I thought, oh my God, you know, this guy, his mom abandoned him in Mexico when he was a little boy. He grew up walking the streets, and I think all he needs is love, you know. So I just love him more. And then I thought, you know, when we get married, he's going to stop drinking, and he's going to stop using all this stuff. And so I've, you know, 2 years of dating this guy, I got pregnant, and we both went to the doctor, and I said, I'm pregnant. And I said, you know, but you don't need to marry me. I'm a strong woman, and I'll be okay. I'm gonna be okay. And still feeling I was so much less than he was. You know, he was my star, and I was nothing. I just couldn't understand why he even would look at me. And so he told me, you're crazy, we're getting married. So we got married, and we had this beautiful little girl. You know, she was this chunky little girl with big cheeks. She looked just like her dad. And I remember looking at my daughter, and she was so much a part of him and I just loved that child. I remember looking at her and saying, we named her Mirabella, which means look at the beauty. And I remember looking at my little girl and saying, you are just so beautiful. Nobody's going to hurt you like I've been hurt. I'm just going to protect you and love you. And you're going to be okay. And but I didn't know that living with an alcoholic, we become sick too. And soon my whole concentration was on what the alcoholic was doing or not doing, and how to prevent him from doing whatever he was about to do. And by this time, my sisters were in the U.S., and they were drinking. Some of them were using drugs. Some of them had joined dangerous gangs. Some of them had married alcoholics that were beating them up, and life was just not good. And I would take my little girl to my daughter, to my sisters, so I could go look for my husband. And I remember, you know, calling the jail, calling his friends. My whole concentration was on whatever he was doing, and I remember waiting for him with a really nice, you know, sexy nightgown, but he never came home, you know. And I remember waiting for him by 2, 3, 4 in the morning. He will finally come home, and by that time I was not feeling sexy anymore. So I would go to the kitchen door, grab a knife, and just wait for him behind the door, you know. And when he would walk in, I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill this guy. And we always lived in neighborhoods where there was a lot of other addicted people, you know, and the neighbors used to come upstairs and say, Magdelena, leave your husband alone, leave Carlos alone. And with that knife and crazy hair and everything, I will tell him, if you don't leave right now and leave me alone, I'm going to kill you too. And his friends would just say, okay, have him, you can have him. And I was not afraid. And so my husband's alcoholism progressed, and now he was not only using small drugs, he was now using heroin, and he was, I don't know, 120, 150, I don't know how much, a lot of money he was using a day, and so he started shoplifting, and I started shoplifting with him, because after all, he needed a supportive wife, you know, and so I was fortunate. I never went to jail because God had a plan for me. God always has a plan. And so I thought, you know, sometimes I cook for him. I didn't cook. I beat him up. I didn't beat him up. Sex, no sex, nothing worked. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have another child. And this time I'm going to have a son, a boy, and he's going to stop drinking. And I couldn't believe it. I had a boy, and I named him after him. But he continued to drink, and I named him after him, Carlos. And I thought, you know, that should stop somebody from drinking after you name your child after a person. And no, of course not. And so one day he finally, the judge told him, you either go to prison or you go to treatment. And he said, I'll go to treatment. And that's when I was introduced to Al-Anon. And I went to my first meeting, and I remember sitting there, and there was a lot of really nice people, and they all had a smile on their face, and they said, would you like to share? And I said, well, I don't know if I belong here, because see, my husband's not an alcoholic, he's an addict. And they said, this really nice lady tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, dear, keep coming back. And she didn't give me the answer, so I still had this false pride that I was better than. You know, I thought, I'm married to this hard dude who's always going to jail. He's full of tattoos. My sisters have nice lowriders. They can beat anybody up. And, you know, this false pride, I had nothing. My sisters didn't work. I don't know how they got that car, you know, and so my husband went to treatment. He came out, started drinking again, and I just started going crazy. I didn't know what to do, and there was nowhere to go. There was no place in this earth for me. I decided that I was going to take karate classes because, before that. Okay. So I decided that I was just going to kill myself because there was no place for me to go. And one day I got in the car and I was driving over 100 miles. I put my 2 kids in the car and I was driving, and I just wanted to die because there was nowhere else to go. I remember thinking, maybe if I go to church, that will help. But the God of my understanding was a punishing God. The God of my understanding had only given me pain. And I remember as a child going to church and getting on my knees, and the priest would say, well, go pray 10 Our Fathers and 3 St. Marys, or I don't know, one of those that is your fault, you know. And I knew some of it was my fault, but not everything. And so that church didn't work for me, so there was nowhere to go. I also thought that if I went to counseling, I thought only people that went to counseling were those who had boogers coming out of their nose and saliva. But, you know, I looked in the mirror and there was a lot of things wrong with my face, but I had no liquids coming out of my face. So I didn't belong in counseling, and the only way out was just to die, because although I was not the best mother, I knew that if we continue in the life that we had been, my kids were going to either end up in jail, you know, become heroin addicts, because that's what everybody was at that time, or die in a shooting or something. And so I love my kids so much, and I just couldn't let them go there, and there was just nowhere else, nothing else. So the only thing to do is just to die. And I got in the car, and then I remember screaming, if there's a God, why aren't you helping me? I need your help. And I was able to stop, and my husband got out of treatment and started drinking again. And, you know, when we ask for help, I know for me, when I ask God for help, I know God listens. He might take a while, but he listens. And during this time, I thought, okay, my husband's drinking again. And I thought, you know, I'm just going to, I told my husband, let's move to Mexico. Here I'm still illegal. I get deported every once in a while. I remember standing, and I want to come back. I have family here now. And I remember standing on the borderline, looking at both sides to see if there was any Border Patrol officers. And when I didn't see any, I would run and run and run to the other side. And if I didn't get arrested, I would be disappointed and go back and do it over again. And I have this, that I am addicted to excitement. I love excitement. Thank God, you know, there's places like for Kathy and I that just love service. I thank God, because Al-Anon has a place for everybody, and I got really busy in service, and I'm still like, I get that excitement, that fulfillment, but it's positive excitement. So anyways, I told my husband, why don't we just, I know what the problem is. The problem is your friends. Let's just move to Mexico and come to work every single day, and we're going to be okay. You're going to be away from your friends. And I had learned a little bit of English where I could cross the border illegally and say that I was born in the U.S. And sometimes they believe me, sometimes they didn't, and they just send me back. But every morning I put my kids on the trunk of the car, and I drove about 120 miles every day to keep my husband away from his friends. He worked in Vista, I worked in San Marcos, and then at night we will go home. And one day and then he was still drinking, so I decided that I was going to take karate classes, because after all, he needed somebody stronger. And so I went and took karate classes, and instead of, when he would come home late, instead of waiting for him by the door, I thought I had gained some kind of serenity, and I will lay in bed.
To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
And when he came into the bedroom, I would just jump and go, try to cut him in little pieces. But, that didn't work either. He continued to drink. One day, I was driving this 120 miles a day, and I was going home, and I saw my husband, and he was on the passenger side, and he just looked like he was dead, Then I looked in the back seat of my car, and I saw my two kids. And those kids were older now. I think my son was 2 years old. My daughter was 6, and I look at them, their faces, and they had the saddest look on their eyes. There they were like zombies. My kids, their hair was long, they were super thin. They didn't play. I didn't notice that the upholstery of the car had been teared down. And I remember looking at my kids, and it's like, for me, it's like I woke up of a nightmare, and I said, what happened here? How did I get here? What happened to the promise that I made to those kids that I was going to take care of them, love them, and not hurt them? My kids, I remember, when my husband and I were fighting, my kids will come out of their bedroom crying and say, Mom, stop, and I would grab my kids and throw them in the room, and I was just so angry, and I was beating my kids. I was not feeding them. I became vegetarian when I was 11 years old because I did yoga, and so my kids were born vegetarian. And when we live in Mexico, there's no running water, there's no grass. There was not enough food, there was no milk, and my husband didn't take him there. I took him there, all because I was trying to keep my husband away from his drinking. And on that day, I remember thinking, I'm out of ideas. I don't know what else to do. And I looked at my kids, and I remember going to my first Al-Anon meeting. And in this meeting, it was in an Al-Anon club, and they had the slogans, the steps, the traditions, and the only thing that stayed in my mind on the first day was first things first and keep coming back. And on that day, I saw my kids, and they were first. And that week, I moved back to the U.S., and my husband went to prison for a long time. And this time, I was ready to do anything the program told me to do. And we moved into this apartment complex that I didn't know, but it was a drug-infected apartment But, you know, we didn't care because there was a swimming pool, there was grass, there was milk, there was food for the kids. And I went back to Al-Anon, and I remember going to my first meeting, or that was my second meeting, and sitting there. And this time I wanted to live more than I wanted to die. And I remember just sitting there shaking. I was shaking. I had stopped eating. I was super thin. I had anemia. I had long hair, and my husband used to cut my hair because while he was drunk, because we were trying to save money, and so he would cut my hair, and I had holes on my jeans. And I remember coming into the meeting, and it was a big meeting in a small room, and I was just shaking and shaking, and I was afraid that somebody was going to kick me out. But I didn't speak English. I understood more than that I was able to speak. And I remember sitting there and being so cold. You know, the cold when there's no more tears. When I remember breathing, and I had this because I had been crying so much, and so I remember sitting there shaking, and there was people around me, and their shoulders touched my arms, and I stopped shaking. I stopped shaking, and I had not stopped shaking in a long time. And I truly believe that the first miracle of Al-Anon happened because I stopped shaking. And I just felt so good, and I heard, get a sponsor, work the steps, keep coming back, read the literature, and do service. And on my third meeting, I went up to this man, and I asked him if he would be my sponsor. And see, I didn't know Ralph was from England, and Ralph has this strong English accent. And here I am from Mexico, I can't speak English. And he said, I asked him after the meeting, and I asked Ralph if he would be my sponsor, because every time somebody share the person, Ralph look at the person. And you know, when we live in alcoholic homes, nobody listens to anybody. And whoever talks louder. And I remember talking with my husband, my sisters, and nobody listened. And I remember them laughing about something, and I didn't know what they were laughing about. I just couldn't understand why the alcoholic was laughing. It wasn't funny. I still today, when I hear speakers, it's like, what are they laughing about? What is it that they're talking about? I just don't get it. So anyways, but Ralph did. Ralph listened to whoever was talking, and after the meeting, I went up to him and said, will you be my sponsor? And Ralph looked at me and said, well, we'll give it a try. And he knew that I hardly spoke English, but Ralph had the unconditional love that we so much talk about it in the program. He didn't care where I came from, how I looked, whether I was dressed nicely or not. Ralph said, we'll give it a try. And Ralph and I started getting together 3 times a week, and I learned that I couldn't take my kids to be babysat by my sisters, because my kids were coming home with burn marks, with cigarette burn marks on their arms. And see, I thought when I would look at my kids coming home like that, I would say, my sisters are not doing that to my kids. My sisters love my kids. And my sisters still love my kids, but that disease had taken over my sisters, and it wasn't, they weren't there anymore. My mom was now selling heroin to my husband with her new boyfriend, and life was just insane. And so I stopped taking my kids over, and Ralph and I met together at the park 3 times a week, and I started going through step 1, Step 1, I'm powerless over people, places, and things. There's nothing I can do to change my husband, my sisters, my father. There's nothing I can do. And my life had become unmanageable, and I started looking at myself, and I always felt so less than everybody. We got to step 2, step 3, we finally got to step 4. My gosh, I stayed back in 3rd grade 3 times, and now I was on step 4 within few months, and I thought, I was getting so smart because Ralph didn't flunk me. And so I got to step forward and I told my sponsor, you know, I'm this horrible person. I'm a bad mother, bad sister, bad, you know, I'm too tall, too skinny. And Ralph said, stop, Magdelena. You know, he said, you are nobody to judge the children of God. And when you're judging yourself, you're judging a child of God. You need to stop that. And so he said, see that bird up there? Because we met in a park, and he said, see that bird up there? And I said, yes. What do you think of that bird? And it was a crow. And I said, well, it's beautiful. He said, do you think that bird gets up in the morning and looks in the mirror and says, you're so dark, you know, your feathers are out of place, one leg smaller than the other was? Like, no, that bird gets up in the morning and goes and does God's will. You know, goes to work and brings food for the kids. That's how we live, Magdelena. Everything else is not as important. We do God's will. And he also said that, well, I can't remember. He said too many things. Rob's still my sponsor today. He's been sponsoring me for 30 years, and I'm just so grateful. I have him in my life. I tell Rob, you're like my father. And I call him on Father's Day, he said, no, Rob, no, Magdelena, I am your sponsor. No, you are my father. And I talked to him this morning, and we have this wonderful relationship, and today I can understand his strong English accent. And so he still lives in San Marcos, and I moved away. But anyways, so there was no Al-Anon meetings, and I knew my kids needed a lot of help. Oh, before that, okay. So I got into service right away because I heard if you can't keep it unless you give it away. And so I became the coffee person, and my group gave me the great honor to be the coffee person. And I was just so grateful that I was granted the service position, because that's how I became a part of. You know, I became a part of all of you. And I remember they used to give me $2 or $3 and 2 empty pots of coffee. And then I would go next room where all the alcoholics were, and I would tell this guy, here's $2 or $3, and then he will give me 2 full pots of coffee. And I will bring it back to the meeting, and then the guy will say, if you need more, let me know so I can give you more. And that's how I was introduced to sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. They were so nice. and so I became that coffee person. When my term was over, I was so concerned because I thought there was nothing else to do. But my group, having done conditional love that we so much talk about, you know, they said there was a position of secretary treasurer coming up. And so I made myself available because now I'm a part of you. I'm no less. My sponsor told me, Magdelena, we're all equals. And if somebody doesn't like you, it's their problem. They're not working a program. He said, we're all equals in the eyes of God. So humans make mistakes, and that's okay. He said, but we're all equals. Your voice is as important as somebody else's. And so I started standing up straight, looking at people on the eye, and I just felt good the way I was. You know, he also said, Magdelena, if everybody was beautiful and or you know, tall, blonde, or however you think you're beautiful is, he's like, don't you think this life will be pretty boring? You know, the world will be boring if we all look the same. We all need to accept each other just as the way we are, because that was how God intended us to be. And I was just so grateful. And so I became, my group, knowing that I was a thief, granted me the position of being the secretary treasurer. And, you know, again, that trust that we put on one another when we try to help one another. There was no Spanish meetings, no Al-Anon Spanish meetings, so I asked Ralph, do you think we can start a meeting? And Ralph said, sure, we can start a meeting. So Ralph, not knowing Spanish, he would come to help me start meetings. And and there was no Al-Anon meetings in that area, and I knew my kids needed help. If Al-Anon was helping me, why wouldn't it help my kids? So I asked my friends, hey, let's start an Al-Anon meeting, and so we started an Al-Anon meeting. Now I was so busy into service that when my husband came out of prison, I had no time for him, to take care of him. And I didn't know what to do with my kids because, I'm the screamer. I always tell my kids what to do. Don't listen to them. But an Al-Anon says that we have courtesy, and we treat everybody with love and respect, including our kids. And I knew that I couldn't scream at my kids anymore. And so I asked my friends, what do you do with the kids? What do you do with them? I get stressed out when they're screaming, and I just don't know. They said, those kids have a story, Magdelena. You listen to your kids. And my friend said, take them for a walk. When you get home from work, pick up your kids, you take them for a walk, listen to what the kids have to say. And I started listening to my kids' stories, and they had this wonderful imagination, and those kids love their dad more than I could ever love him. They understood the disease of alcoholism. They knew their father was sick. I didn't know, I didn't know. And so they started, they waited for their dad until he came home from prison, and they would tell me about their days. And, life is so good. Thank God for those ladies that told me that I needed to listen to my kids, because today, every Wednesday, the family gathers together because our kids come home every Wednesday, and they want to talk to mom and dad. They want to tell the stories. They're used to communicating with us. And if it wasn't for this program, I wouldn't have that communication with my kids. And so I started taking them for walks, and then my friend said, you feed them, you help them with their homework, you give him a bath, you put him in bed, and you read a story. And then you go to bed and you read something, because in the One Day at a Time in the pamphlet, it says, just for today, I will not be a mental loafer. I will learn something useful. So every night, every day, I read something, because I choose not to be a mental loafer, and so that's what I was doing when my husband came home, and he comes home and he says, well, if you don't do A, B, or C, I'm going to go out and get drunk. And then I thought, well, gosh, I told him, just make sure you lock the door on your way out, But, and I had learned the gift of detachment that we so much talked about in Al-Anon. I didn't get in front of the door or anything. I just told him that. And what he chose to do, he chose to go to an AA meeting. And today he's been sober for 30 years. And Carlos is a great guy. His service has been with the Spanish community. He starts a meeting, then he gets everybody into service, the meeting flourishes, then he goes and starts another one, and then he starts another one. And people just love him. When I'm having a problem with him, I try to see him how God sees him. I try to see how his friends in AA see him, with unconditional love that I don't always have. And so, anyways, it was 1990, and the world was getting together in Seattle. The International Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon was happening, and our kids were were involved in Al-Anon. They were at the SCAC, yeah. And so my husband and I decided to pull them out of the convention and drove to Seattle. And we just fell in love with the city. It was just so beautiful. It was so green, so many rivers, so many lakes. And then I remember I always loved running. And I went for a run while we were camping during the convention. And I went for a run, and I was just so grateful, telling God, I am just so grateful. I don't know why you bring me to beautiful places like it is here today. I went for a run this morning, and yes, it was hot, thanks Carol, for letting me borrow your sunscreen. And it's just, God is everywhere, everywhere. And I saw the beautiful mountains here, and it's like, God, you love me so much. You take me to places where I never dreamed they existed. And just like places like this and in Seattle. And so I was running and feeling so grateful about God taking me to Seattle, and that I said, why do you love me? Why do you bring me to these places? And then I found a little heart that says, I love you. And it was in July. Valentine's Day had passed, and I learned, you know, God really loves me. He really loves me. And so I still have that little heart. And after that convention, we fell in love with the city, and we came home and back to Escondido. That's where we lived. And I told my husband, why can't we move to Seattle? You know what happens when we stop bailing the alcoholic out of jail? There's a lot of money. Every time I bailed the alcoholic out of jail, it was like $800, $600. I was always borrowing money, but since I learned that I didn't have to do that, you know, that was so much fun. We were able to buy a home, a boat, a trailer, everything that two kids that had nothing were able to get. And so we came home, sold everything, and we didn't care because that's material. Material energy is not as important as going with what your heart tells you. And we know that wherever we go, God is there, and you are there because you have taught me what God is. And so we moved to Seattle. We lived in this one-bedroom apartment. Kids thought they were camping every night because it was so green. And I went to the local intergroup office, and I said, do you have anything for me to do? Because, you know I can't keep it unless I give it away. And she said, well, keep coming back so we can get to know you better. So I kept going back, and they gave me the great honor to be the Al-Anon coordinator for the Seattle Intergroup office. And kids were now in Al-Anon. Husband, there was one AA meeting in Spanish that met once a week on Sundays. And my husband and another friend said, you know, there's got to be more alcoholics than you and I. Let's go look for more. And so that's what they did. And you know, the stories about that he started several meetings, and there's so many meetings, Spanish meetings, but it takes two, right? It takes two. And so I got involved in service. My daughter was very active in Al-Anon, so was my son. My daughter was speaking everywhere. She was speaking in Alaska, in schools everywhere, and we were a happy family. And then one day my daughter started coming home with bruises in her arms and bags, black bags under her eyes, and I just didn't know what was going on with her. She had become this beautiful girl with beautiful long hair, but then something was going on. She was very active in her Al-Anon, and I found out that, you know, that she was drinking. And I couldn't believe it. How can that happen? You know, how can my daughter be drinking? You know, and I remember calling Ralph, and I said, Ralph, my daughter's drinking. And he said, well, Magdelena, you know, your God loves alcoholics too. And maybe he wants your daughter to learn something. And so I remember screaming at the God of my understanding and saying, how dare you give me an alcoholic daughter after all the service work I have done? You know, that was not supposed to happen. How can my little girl be drinking? You know, and that's when her journey began. We offered to take her to treatment. She went to treatment, came out, went to treatment, came out, and I thought my daughter was going to die because, see, what happens when our kids grow up in the program, they know all the right words to say. You know, they know I'm drinking one day at a time. I mean, I'm not drinking one day at a time, you know. You're really helping me. I can see things, you know, I'm keeping it easy, keeping it simple, and all the right words. And, you know, what she was doing, she thought she was manipulating the counselors, but she was killing herself. And I didn't know what to do. Again, you know, I just kept going to meetings. My sponsor said, you continue to do service work, Magdelena. You continue to do service work. I started going to meetings north of Seattle because I didn't want people to know that my daughter was drinking. I didn't want people in my home group to know because I couldn't talk about it. It was so painful. And I started going to meetings in North Seattle so I could act like a newcomer and just cry and cry and cry. And it was okay. You know, we do what we have to do, but I never left Al-Anon. And I knew that if I kept helping my daughter by giving her a comfortable place to sleep, meals, I was just going to help her kill herself. And it was too painful for me to watch my beautiful daughter kill herself in front of me. So in Al-Anon, I learned that those people that we love the most, we give them to God. You know, and I love my daughter, and I knew I had no power to change her. I knew that. And what I did, in Al-Anon suggest that we put our kids in the hands of God. And when she's in the hands of God, she has everything she needs because nobody loves us more than God can love us. And before she was mine, she was God's child. And so I give her to God and say, God, she's yours, take her. And when she's in the hands of God, you know, there's food, there's blankets, there's love, there's everything that I can give her. And the reason why we had to ask her to leave was because not only she was killing herself in front of us, but we had that little boy that was living in the house, and she would say, if you don't drink with me, you're not a man. Tradition 1 talks about unity, and when the person is unwilling to unite for the purpose, for the best of everyone, the person needs to leave. And so that's what we had to ask her to leave. During this time, I was working at a Denny's restaurant. I was working the graveyard shift. I was, I got home one day and I had this green uniform. I was full of grease, and I got on my knees and I said, God, how much longer do I need to do these kind of jobs? I had been a housekeeper, dishwasher, hostess, waitress, farm worker, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that lifestyle as long as it's a job. But my sponsor said, Magdelena, you need to go back to school. And I told Ralph, no, Ralph, remember, I'm stupid. He's like, no, Magdelena, I told you need to stop talking so badly about yourself. You are nobody again to judge the children of God. You go back to school. During this time, I learned that I have always loved exercising. So I remember going for a run and running. And if somebody passed me, I used to call myself names. But because Ralph told me I couldn't call myself names, I used to, when somebody passed me and my feelings were hurt, I would start singing to myself, pretty woman running down the street. So, anyways, so that day I remember my sponsor telling me to go back to school, and that's what I did. And during this time, my daughter was missing, and I remember calling my sponsor, and I said, Ralph, I haven't seen my daughter. I just want to go look for her. She's 15 years old. I want to go look for her. But I have finals today. And Ralph would say, Magdelena, you go to school. And if your daughter ever decides to come back, she'll find an educated mother. And that's what happened. In 1999, I graduated with a 4-year college degree. Thank you. My daughter went to treatment one more time. She came home and said, Mom, can I go to treatment? I said, no, Mirabella. I said, you go to school. You go to AA, get a sponsor, work the steps, and you're going to be okay. I trust Alcoholics Anonymous. I trust that it works. I trust Al-Anon. I know these principles are God-written, and I know it works. And so she looked at me, she got really close to me. She had been drinking, and when she spoke, she smelled just like my dad, the stale alcohol that I just hated so much on my dad. My daughter had it. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, don't you understand I can't stop drinking? I couldn't understand that. And I said, no, I don't, but other people can. So on that day in November, my husband and I wrapped her in a blanket because she was our little girl. We put her in the back seat of the car, and we took her to treatment in Spokane, Washington. It was a snowy Thanksgiving weekend, and we took her to the treatment center. At the treatment center, they took her to a Native American meeting. The Native American meeting needed a coffee person. You know, she's been in Al-Anon. She knows all about service. So she became the coffee person, and today, by the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, she's been sober for 20 years. You know, she got married to the guy of her dreams. She was very active. You know, they had a beautiful wedding, beautiful daughter. Unfortunately, her husband relapsed, and she went to him and said, you know, I love you, but I love my sobriety and my daughter more than you. And she walked out, just like that. You know, she didn't need to take karate classes or anything. You know, she just walked out. Kids just get so smart, you know. I'm sure she learned something in all those years in Al-Anon. And today she's remarried and she has 2 other kids. She has 3 kids, and she's the most beautiful girl. You know, when she's doing good, you know, she walks and the butterflies follow her. But when she's not practicing her program, I'm like, who is that child? We have our granddaughter, and you know, she just loves to be around my husband and I. She loves her grandparents. She's into dancing, and she tells us that one day we were not able to go because of an Al-Anon event, and she started crying, and she said, I want you guys to be in my dance, you know, in my dance activities. She's like, you guys are fun. You're not like those boring grandparents. You know, you guys do a lot of fun things, and I want you in my life. And, you know, what an honor. What an honor. If on my sick mind, if I would have killed my kids on that date, if I would not have found you, I don't know, I would never have had my beautiful grandkids. Our son, you know, he says, Mom, after 10 years of Al-Anon, I'm well. I'm normal now, Mom. That's enough. No more Al-Anon for me. And that's okay. He's grown up with the principles of the program. He talks our language. And one day when he was about 15 years, he was early in high school, he had a girlfriend, and they both bought a cat, and they broke up, and he gained custody of the cat and brought the cat home. And I hate cats, you know, I don't like cats. But he brought this cat home, and one day I was having an Al-Anon relapse, you know, and I went, this kid he's very responsible. He never skips school. He cleans his room. But I'm looking for a fight, you know. I'm looking for a fight. I'm not feeling well. I'm going to find somebody to pick on. So I went to his room, and I opened the door, and I saw that it was a mess. And I wrote him a nasty note saying, if you don't clean your room, I'm going to throw your cat away. No. Tradition 10 talks about not getting into outside issues. My son's room, it's an outside issue. You know, we don't get in controversies, but when I'm picking on somebody, I get into controversies that are not necessary. And so I wrote him that note, if you don't clean your room, I'm going to throw your cat away. And then so he wrote another nasty note back saying, Mom, I'm cleaning my room one day at a time. So I'm not all the way done yet, you know. So he put the triangle with the circle. He put AA Al-Anon. He said, keep coming back, it works. In Spanish, P.S., leave my cat alone. When he went away to the university, I got stuck taking care of the cat. But you know what happens? I introduced him to the outside world. And now he's a happy, joyous, and free cat, you know. Now this kid travels all over the world. He loves life. He just loves life. My husband and I, Carlos, have been married for 36 years. Now I work for the state of Washington as a parole officer. I send people to treatment, to AA. You know, when they don't want to go, I have no problem taking them to jail. You know, letting them face the consequences to their actions. We go into this. I'm sorry, I got 10 minutes left. So I told my sponsor one day, my job can be dangerous. We go into rooms where alcoholics, for some reason, they don't like the light. They like it dark. But we go into the rooms and take their alcohol away, their weapons away, and their drugs, and they really are not happy about that. And so I called my sponsor and I said, Ralph, my job is dangerous. I think I need to be armed, but in order to be armed, I need to have passed this psychological evaluation. And I don't know if I will pass it because, I'm kind of crazy. And Ralph said, well, Magdelena, if God wants you to have a gun, you will. So today I'm an armed officer. I call my sisters and I go, guess what? I have a gun. And they're like, is your husband going to be okay? They're worried about him, but they don't understand recovery. Today I have a great relationship with my sisters because I don't tell them what to do. I have a good relationship with my mom because I accept her just the way she is. She believes on witchcraft, and that's her choice. I have a program she doesn't. My dad, he's not a safe person because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So he's still drinking. I see him, and that's okay. Today I am still involved in service. I serve in panel 50 as a delegate. I represented my state. And at the end of my term, I was not happy with what the chairperson was doing. And in Al-Anon says, one of our slogans says, let it begin with me. If I don't like something, I'm gonna try to change what I can. And so today I'm the chairperson of my area. I'm just so grateful for the life that I have today. I'm gonna end with this little story. When I was a little girl, I remember going to the beach in Ensenada, going under the waves and hoping that, and I remember having all kinds of open wounds. The salt water hurts your open wounds, and the salt water hurt. And I remember going under the waves and thinking, I wish there was another life than what I have today. I wish there was a place where people just loved each other and they accepted, and there was no pain where, I was not getting beat. And today I feel that I have come out on, today I feel that I have gone under the wave and come out on the other side, and I have found all of you. Thank you so much for the life I can have today. Love you.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.